the most powerful battleship ever built, fired her main guns at an enemy surface target exactly once in 4 years of war. She spent the rest of her career sitting at anchor, burning fuel Japan could not replace, while the admirals argued about whether she was too valuable to risk losing. Then in April 1945, with the war already decided, they sent her out with only enough fuel to reach her destination. Not enough to come back. The Yamato was never defeated by the enemy. She was defeated by the logic of the weapon she had been built to be. Too large to hide, too expensive to use, too symbolic to abandon, and in the end, too slow to survive the answer to a single question from an emperor who wanted to know where his navy had gone. 3,055 men went out with her on April 6, 1945. 276 came back. The rest are still down there. To understand what the Yamato actually was, you have to understand the problem Japan believed she solved. By the late 1930s, Japan knew it could never match American shipbuilding tonnage. The United States had the industrial capacity to outbuild the Imperial Japanese Navy ship for ship, class for class, almost indefinitely. The admirals in Tokyo understood this with complete clarity, so they made a different decision. Instead of building more ships, they would build one ship so overwhelmingly powerful that no American vessel would be able to fight her and survive. Not a deterrent, a guarantee. Construction began at the Kure Naval Arsenal in 1937. The dry dock had to be excavated a full metre deeper just to accommodate the hull. Workers who signed on to the project signed agreements that carried the threat of execution if they revealed what they were building. Screens were hung around the dock so that passing ships in the harbour could not see the shape taking form inside. She was never officially photographed during construction. When American naval intelligence received a report from a captured Japanese aviator in 1943 claiming that a third Yamato-class hull was being converted to a carrier, they dismissed it as unreliable. They had no idea the Yamato herself existed until Japanese officers described her at surrender hearings in 1945. The numbers, when she was finally complete, were genuinely difficult to absorb. 72,800 tons fully loaded, 862 feet long. Main armament, 9 18.1-inch guns in 3 triple turrets. The largest naval guns ever mounted on any warship in history. Each shell weighed 1,460 kilograms. Each turret weighed 2,774 tons, heavier than most of the destroyers she would sail alongside. The effective range of her guns was 42 kilometers. She was commissioned in December 1941, the same week as Pearl Harbor. She became the flagship of the combined fleet. Admiral Yamamoto directed the Battle of Midway from her bridge. And at Midway, the Yamato never fired a shot. This is the thing about the Yamato that most accounts gloss past. The ship that was designed to be the decisive weapon of the Pacific War was kept away from every decisive engagement it might have changed. The reasoning was sound in its own terrible way. The Yamato was irreplaceable. Japan could not build another one. If she was sunk, the loss would be not just military, but psychological. Proof that the weapon Japan had staked its naval doctrine on had failed. So she was held back, conserved, protected from the battles that might have justified her existence. She fired her main guns at enemy surface targets exactly once, at the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, against American escort carriers so small and so lightly armed that her shells were landing 2 miles wide because her fire control systems had never been calibrated for targets that thin. By early 1945, Japan had lost its carrier aviation, most of its capital ships, and the oil fields that had fed the fleet. The Yamato sat in the inland sea consuming reserves that no longer existed, serving no strategic function that anyone could clearly articulate. Then the Emperor asked where the Navy was. The question came during a briefing on the defense of Okinawa. American forces had landed on April 1st. The army presented its plan. Hirohito listened, and then he asked with what accounts describe as quiet deliberation what the Navy intended to do. The answer required that someone explain to the Emperor that the Navy had almost nothing left. What followed was Operation Tengo. The Yamato, the light cruiser Yahagi, and 8 destroyers would sail south toward Okinawa. They would beach the Yamato on the shore and use her guns as fixed artillery until the ammunition ran out. Then the crew would go ashore and keep fighting with rifles. The fuel allocation was calculated for a one-way trip. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, the commander assigned to lead the operation, initially refused. He told his superiors it was futile. He used the word futile in the official record. His objection was noted and overruled. The captains who would carry out the mission were not informed of the full details until April 5th, 2 days before departure. Captain Tamichi Hara of the Yahagi described it later as throwing an egg against a rock. He went anyway. On the morning of April the 6th, the task force left Tokuyama. The fuel depot workers, defying their orders, had quietly loaded more oil than the official allocation allowed. It still was not enough for a return journey. 67 naval cadets had arrived at the Yamato 3 days earlier, fresh from the academy. They were sent home. There was no point, the officers decided, in taking boys who had been sailors for 3 days to a battle they were not going to survive. 80 men who were sick or new to their assignments were also ordered off. The rest stayed. American submarines spotted the task force almost immediately as it passed through the Bungo Strait. The contact reports reached Task Force 58 within hours. Admiral Mitcher had 15 carriers and nearly 900 aircraft at his disposal. He briefly considered sending a battle line of fast battleships to intercept the Yamato in a surface engagement, the kind of battle the Yamato had been built for. He decided against it. The aircraft were faster, cheaper, and entirely sufficient. The attack came in waves beginning at 12:37 p.m. on April 7th. Nearly 400 aircraft in total against 6 Japanese fighters flying combat air patrol. The Yamato's anti-aircraft gunners fired everything they had. The damage control teams ran between compartments for 2 hours, counting hits, shoring up bulkheads, reporting to the bridge in terms that grew progressively more catastrophic with each update. 11 torpedoes found the hull. 8 bombs hit the superstructure. The list to port became severe enough that the damage control officers made the decision to flood the starboard engine and boiler rooms deliberately, drowning the men inside them to prevent the ship from capsizing immediately. It bought perhaps 20 minutes. At 2:23 p.m, the fires reached the forward ammunition magazines. The explosion that followed registered on seismographs across the region. a mushroom cloud rose 6 kilometers into the sky. Observers on the Japanese coast, more than 160 kilometers away, reported seeing it. American pilots circling at altitude described it as something beyond their capacity to compare to anything they'd witnessed before. The Yamato was gone in seconds. Of the 3,332 crew members aboard, 3,055 were lost. 276 survived. Captain Ariga, who had tied himself to the compass binnacle before the battle so that he would go down with the ship rather than be swept off the deck, was among the dead. The task force never came within 100 miles of Okinawa. The wreck was located in August 1985 by a Japanese expedition using deep submersibles. She lies 290 kilometers southwest of Kyushu, at a depth of 340 meters, split into two main sections by the magazine explosion that ended her. The forward section lies on its starboard side, showing the torpedo damage clearly in the photographs. The stern section lies upside down. The three main gun turrets, each weighing nearly 3,000 tons, broke free when the ship rolled and now lie scattered across the debris field. The superstructure is somewhere in between, collapsed and partially buried. 3,055 men are still inside what remains of her. Japan designated the site a protected war grave. No salvage has ever been attempted. None is technically feasible in any practical sense, and the legal prohibition as a war grave makes the question irrelevant. There is a term that military strategists have been using since the 1950s, Yamato syndrome. The tendency of military institutions to build weapons so expensive and so symbolically important that they become impossible to actually deploy. Too valuable to risk, too powerful to use. A weapon that wins every argument in the planning room and loses every battle it never fights. The United States has had this conversation about its supercarriers for 40 years. A carrier strike group costs approximately $2 billion per day to operate. American strategists have documented the growing reluctance to put carrier groups inside range of Chinese anti-ship missile systems in a Taiwan contingency. The carrier exists, the carrier is ready, and yet the carrier sits beyond the missile envelope, holding the line from a distance, because losing one is unacceptable. China studied the Yamato carefully. Their naval planners coined a phrase for it: expensive display, maximum deterrence, minimum deployment. They are building carriers now too. The Yamato was not a failure of engineering. The hull was sound. The guns worked. The armour held longer than it had any right to against the weight of metal thrown at it. What failed was the doctrine that produced her. The belief that a weapon large enough, expensive enough, powerful enough would by its existence alone change the outcome of a war. It did not change anything. She fired her main guns at an enemy surface target once. She spent 4 years at anchor. She sailed to her destruction on a mission designed by people who knew she could not complete it because an emperor had asked a question and someone had to provide an answer. The largest battleship ever built, the most powerful naval guns ever made, built in complete secrecy, hidden from the world for years, and then sent out on a morning in April with only enough fuel to reach the place where she would die. She is still there, with 3,055 men, and the turrets that were supposed to win the war, and the question nobody in Tokyo ever answered honestly: What exactly was she for?